All right. You can start it. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for indulging me.
Excellent. Thank you, Tucker and board members. And we are here this afternoon with representatives from the city of Wenatchee to talk about the Okanagan property and water reservoir and everything that goes along with that conversation. So I'm going to turn it over to Darcy Roning, utility project management for the city, and her team as well. So thank you for being here. You can use whichever one you want. Okay. You do it. I think you may have to turn that one on.
There we go. How's that? Okay, great. I'll go ahead and switch over to our screen. I'm going to do that.
You want to share?
Yes, please. Start that. Okay, and I'll advance to the first slide. Oh.
While you're getting that set up, I'll just add that
There we go.
we just want to thank the city of Wenatchee. We have been in collaborative conversations about some of the water reservoir changes over the last 2 years, I would say, maybe even longer. And this is, it's been a lot of the city of Wenatchee and the Wenatchee School District. And so it's nice to have us all in the same room with our board members to have a collaborative conversation and learn more. So thank you for being here and your collaboration. Appreciate that.
Thank you. We appreciate your time. We appreciate this opportunity to just get in front of you and talk to you about some of these past conversations and what we're trying to accomplish at the city. I'd like to start by introducing ourselves. Dr. Kalahar started to introduce me. I'm Darcy Ronning. I'm a utility project manager with the city of Wenatchee. I'm also a resident. I moved here in 2018 and quickly made it my home and fell in love with this community. Shortly after that, I was lucky to get on with the city of Wenatchee as a utility planner and just take on more about what we do in this community from a utility perspective. I've brought with us today Jessica Shaw and Stephen Neuschwander, so I'll let them introduce themselves, tell them a little bit about it. First, Stephen?
Okay, I can use this one.
Okay, try it out.
Okay. Here we go, Karina. Okay, so I'm Steve Neuschwander. I'm the Assistant Community Development Director for the city of Wenatchee. I've lived in the valley for going on about 22 years now. We have 3 graduates of the Wenatchee school system through Washington, Orchard, and the high school. And we have currently a freshman in the high school right now. So a lot invested in the school district and our community. Yeah, I'm just happy to be here. So my role today is really going to be to talk more about our comprehensive plan and where the city is going, what our needs are as far as housing, and what we're looking at as far as growth patterns are concerned.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Jessica Shaw. I'm the Deputy Public Works Director Utilities for the city of Wenatchee, and I'm also a Panther. I'm not going to tell you what year I graduated though, because it's been a while ago. But really happy to be here working with you guys. You know, my favorite part of my job is just being able to serve my community where I grew up. And this is a big project for the city, for our water utility, and we're just excited to share what we're working on and some opportunities that we think we can work together with the school district. So just thank you so much for giving us some time this morning or this afternoon, and please feel free to ask questions. Darcy will run through our agenda here in a minute, but we're hoping for some great dialogue today and just to hear what you guys have to say. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to show you the brief agenda and let you know that there are a lot of slides. We do intend to cover a lot of territory today, but mostly we would like to spend maybe a half an hour on all of these slides and then just really have an open dialogue with you and hear from you. I don't expect you to ingest everything we're giving you today, so I'm glad that Dr. Kalahar has these slides that you could flip through later, and the same will go with Stephen's presentation because it's a lot of data and a lot of information, but we wanted you to have it for consideration because this is heavy lift stuff we've been working on for a couple years. So there's a lot to consider, as you probably have similar information, but we're going to turn this over to Stephen and let him start with the growth of our city and what we plan for as a whole as a city. And then I'll come back to us and I'll tell you how that fits into water supply for the city of Wenatchee and what that means all the way down to affecting the school itself. And then we'll switch presentations. Yes. Thank you. Okay, you're in charge.
Steven, can I ask a question really quick? So what's the definition of a household in this? Like, is if you have a single person living and they're paying rent on their apartment, that would be a household? Is that right? Okay, so it's kind of any unit of who is paying the kind of their individual costs. Okay, thank you.
It's just interesting, Stephen, when you show that graph. I think it's very telling. We had a former superintendent, Bill Eagle, and I had a conversation with Steve Mayer. And he was telling us about the gap between the population increase and then the homes and units that are needed. Same data that you were sharing as well. And he was just talking about how important it is for Wenatchee to look at going up instead of going out, because going out is inhibited by mountains, obviously, but it was just an interesting conversation because I had never thought of it from that perspective. And we see a lot of that now where we're going up in a variety of ways, whether it's townhomes that we can fit on a smaller footprint, or it's these multifamily units. So anyway, great information.
Yeah.
I was say, and so presumably in 2022, when you say there's 249 units that come online, that includes these multifamily things, but each of those is in that we need 241 a year. We're meeting that need. So in that 1 year, hey, we did it. Right. But that's the one. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Thank you. I'm happy to answer questions now, or we've got a Q&A along with the main time we can.
I have a quick one.
Yeah, me too.
I would say, so would you say that this is kind of consistent with that region is like East Wenatchee and Kashmir looking at the same kind of housing, lack of housing? Yeah. So it's not like we're also need to be aware of the competition. I mean, we do, but like,
East Wenatchee, they got agricultural land that, you know, goes for miles. So I used to work in East Wenatchee, Douglas County, and we went through the process to expand their urban area, so there was a lot of land. And that's going to shift how our communities grow. But with that, they have a lot of challenges that we don't have. Right, they have special purpose districts, they have a water district, sewer district, that have independently elected officials that govern how those services are used. We don't, like, we manage our water and our sewer, so we really have control of how the development happens in a different way from other jurisdictions.
great, thank you.
So just a question that you said we were experiencing the same as other cities. On the one graph you showed, East Wenatchee was at a much lower rate in growth. And why is Wenatchee experiencing a much larger growth rate than East Wenatchee?
I'll just add from developer perspective on that one as well, because they have so many different jurisdictions controlling each and every utility element. It's been very difficult for developers to submit proposals and get comprehensively through a system out there. Plus, they also kept their urban growth area artificially small for a very long time. So they're just now starting to expand out more, grab more land, expand their utilities to match their land grab. So a lot of these areas weren't even available for development. And so that's part of the reason for my work with developers, why it's been a challenge to not as attractive to develop in the East Wenatchee side. But one of my other comments was, I think we have a shared goal in affordable housing, but the type of housing that the city seems to particularly need isn't as conducive to enrollment for our schools, because we've found that the apartment style, smaller unit living doesn't generate the families that we need to bring into our district. So so we almost need more of the small lots, multifamily type scenarios. Is that part of your planning, or is it all mostly looking up for apartments and rentals and?
I was just gonna let you go ahead and move on. So as Steven is telling you about all this growth, of course, he mentioned that we have a utility challenge as well to match that, especially with infill housing, because although we put water lines there, they're not necessarily built to have enough fire flow and things to serve those houses they're going to infill. And so we are studying that and looking at that, and water reservoirs are one of the ways they come through. So Jessica is going to take us through some basic water information, and then we'll get really into the heart of the project. So do you want to use this? Okay.
Thank you, Darcy. So just some few facts about our water system. So there's actually two water systems in the city of Wenatchee. Chelan PUD provides the outer area, but the city of Wenatchee is really the core, the older part of town. And we'll look at some maps of what represents the city's drinking water system. But we get our water from up north near Rocky Ridge Dam. We have about 27,000 customers. And of course, with the accessory dwelling units, duplexes in the backyard, we're going to see that grow way faster than what we ever anticipated, because for the most part, the city's water system was not really anticipated to grow until now, because it's really going to start infilling. And as Darcy mentioned, we need to make sure we're planning and that we have resilient infrastructure that can really meet the needs of that additional infill and make it a safe place to live, right? We want to be able to fight fires if there's house fires. We want to be able to provide clean drinking water to our families and people that want to live here in the valley. We have 4 reservoirs right now, and the not so great news is that all of these reservoirs are past the end of their service life. So we have a tall order of working to make sure we get these reservoirs replaced. And so we're looking at a combination of rehabilitation projects to buy more time, and also looking at replacing reservoirs, which we'll talk more about here in a minute. And of course, our drinking water, people use it to water their lawn. We use it to fight fires, so a variety of things. And so sometimes if you think about, well, we don't really drink that much water, but we're using it for laundry, we're showering with it, we're using it for all kinds of other things. And so the actual demand for the whole regional, for the valley, is about 10.5 million gallons per day right now. So that's a lot of water. The city of Wenatchee makes up about 30% of that, 40% of it. But then East Wenatchee is catching up with us, right? And their water use as well. So we use a lot of water. We're anticipating to continue to use more over time. The other thing I wanted to point out is the water utility. While we're part of the city, we're considered to be what we call an enterprise, or like a separate business. So the water utility is not for profit. All of our money that we use to maintain and to rebuild the system comes from our utility rates, which is all the people who live in our water system. So when we're looking at doing projects, we have to think really hard about how much should we be charging people. And we work really hard to get grants and loans. But if you've been paying attention to some of the news from EPA and the federal government, even our state, funding for projects is really rough right now. And so we'll have some tough decisions to make. But just so you know, we have some of the lowest utility rates in Washington, like in central Washington, even we're right down there with ENIAT and Afreda as far as what we charge for water, and for the size of our community. As Stephen said, we're really efficient, but maybe almost too efficient in some respects. So we're looking at, having to keep up with this growth. We have to weigh, trying to make the most of our dollars, because we know that has a direct impact on affordable housing, right? Is how much does it cost for those basic services that you need for those houses? So here's a picture of our service area. So you can see we're right in the middle there. Pretty much our boundaries are Western, Crawford, roughly, though we do sneak out a bit on the south end, and then Maple Street. So we really are the core part of the city. And as Dr. Callahar mentioned, a lot of what's happening is we're seeing parking lots, turn into multi-story apartment complexes. We're seeing folks, these are some of our older lots, and they're adding ADUs. And so those are the kinds of things we're now shifting gears, because previously the utilities really just planned for single family, and there wasn't a lot that was going to be happening in this area. So lots changing. So reservoirs, when we talk about reservoirs, of course, I know exactly what this is. We look at them all day long, but not everybody looks at the same things we do. These reservoirs are large tanks. All of ours are concrete tanks. They hold millions of gallons of water, so many swimming pools. Our largest tank is 8 million gallons, but we also have a 4 million gallon tank. And then we have 2 smaller ones that are our 2 and our 1 million gallon tank. And this is just an overview of how these tanks work together to provide water to the whole system. Another important part of these tanks and why they have to be at certain elevations is that they keep our system pressurized. So when you turn on the water, you automatically have water because that whole water system, all the pipes under the ground are pressurized. The other important part of that too is by keeping pressure in the water system, it prevents dirty water from your house or from your landscaping to get back into our drinking water. So we're very concerned about water going one way, going into your house and not coming back, going into the business. And so maintaining pressure in our water system, plus nobody wants to take a shower from a trickling drip, 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 right? Everybody likes water pressure. So part of that is by our pumping system. It's by pumping water up into the tanks, and then that water is released back as people use it into our water system. So I had another question the other day, which I thought was a great question. I hadn't really thought about before. Someone said, well, you know, when we have a big fire, like big wildfires, how do the firemen get the water out of that tank? So for the most part, these tanks are sealed up. We have security. We also try to make sure that nobody gets in there. They're closed up, protected, because we're very concerned about water quality, right? If you've heard in Seattle, I think they've almost gotten rid of all of their open storage tanks just because you get birds, you get animals, people in there. So our tanks, thankfully, are already all closed up. But then when there is a fire, the key way that we get fire to fight fires is from fire hydrants. And so that's why you find fire hydrants on every corner, and that's tied into the same water system. So you can see on the slide as the water for your house comes from, as the water for your irrigation, depends on where you're at. Some people do use the ditch water, but there's all these different connections to that water system that provide water to all of the different uses. So the reservoir on Okanagan Street, it was built in 1930. It's our oldest reservoir. It is 95 years old. The service life for reservoirs is about 60 years. So we've made it last about 35 extra years. And how we did that with a lot of maintenance, we put several liners in it. We've repaired holes in the roof. So as you can see, we did repairs, and we've probably done repairs even longer, but at least as far as our records go back, we've been making repairs about every 10 to 15 years. And we are to a point now with our last analysis a few years ago, there's really not much more we can do to repair this. Another issue with is it's leaking. It leaks quite a bit of water. And despite the repairs, there's not much more we could do to stop it leaking. But city overwide loses about 22% of our water every year to leaks. And so this is one of the big sources of that. And of course, you know, the state is very concerned about us wasting water. So we want to do a better job. Clean water is hard to come by, and we're very fortunate here to have a very excellent water source. So we need to work on our leakage. The other piece of this is through our analysis is it's not big enough. You know, we have all this growth happening. We have to be careful about when these things come out of service for maintenance. And so we want to make sure that when we rebuild it, we're not just building the same tank, right? We got to think about where our community is going to be. And if it's going to last 60 years or even 100 years, how big does it need to be for the next 100 years for our community? So these are just some of the things that we've been thinking about as we have been working on replacing this tank. Darcy.
Thanks, Jessica. So I got the opportunity to do this project. It's pretty exciting because you don't build a water reservoir every day. So it's an honor in someone's career to be able to take on a project like this. I love the collaboration. So when we, take on this massive of a project, you have to ask yourself, what are we going to try to accomplish besides just a water reservoir? And so some of the areas of focus that we started with, is we've got to hire an engineer. So we ended up awarding the project to Stantec Engineering to what we're calling design to 30%. And that's standard in our industry. That means we pretty much weed out the critical flaws. We try to really narrow down what it needs to look like in its basic form, what size footprint would that be, and throw some costs at it. And that type of thing allows us to then start looking for funding sources or community partners to work with. But it's kind of like putting the chicken before the egg. We kind of have to know what we're designing to know what we're going after. So when we started the conversation after getting Stantec on board, some of the areas of focus that we talked about is supply to meet the demand in the next 50 years and beyond. And truly that's because we don't think this tank will get replaced again in another 60 years. And so we need to think about beyond 20, what does 50 look like? We know we have a middle housing issue that's coming down the way with these new ADU infills and such that Stephen talked about. Fire protection, but climate resiliency. Every year, our risk of fire goes up. Chelan County is actually #1 in the state of Washington for fire, and it gives us a lot of risk, and it gives us a lot of dollars thrown our way that we can take advantage of. We're currently in a project related to that. We got a good grant because we scored so high on fire risk. So we definitely want to make sure that we can provide fire protection. That gets more challenging for every story that a apartment complex goes up or the bigger a hospital facility. So we have to really take into account the water modeling that goes into building up instead of just out. And fitting into the community. We know that these can be ugly, obnoxious, and not everybody wants us next door, but they need us. So what does that look like? What if we end up in your neighborhood? How do we become a good neighborhood partner? You've seen them around. Here they paint them brown and they blend into the hills. On the west side, they paint to look like trees or scenery. Those are all efforts to fit into the community or appease someone that maybe has us as a next door neighbor. So those are some of the things we look at. And then, of course, cost and operation, not just for what would it cost our community as we go to fund a water reservoir. Current costs are around $16 million. Every year that we wait, that cost goes up. So not only what is the best value, but how do we operate that? It's like a car. Say everything operates differently and it's going to have a different price tag if we go with the Maserati versus the Honda model, and they're going to need different operation techniques. So we spend a lot of time working with our operators that run these tanks every single day. What do you like? What do you don't? Where do you want the on-off switch? What would make this easier for you? Are there parts that we constantly replace that we could avoid installing on a new tank? We really look at that because, again, those are dollars to our community every time we have to replace or repair something. So we keep that in mind in the back. And then what can we get funding for? And truly, we sometimes design around funding. What will they fund? They'll fund fire resiliency right now. They'll fund clean drinking water, and so those are appealing when we go after a grant. They will also fund amenities. They like to see things that are layered. They like to see things where we have shared partnerships. And to us, those are all win-wins because we like all that too, but they also help us rank a little higher when we go to apply for grant funding. And affordable housing costs. If we have to increase rates, that's not affordable housing, or it affects that overall impact of their basic needs versus what they have to spend, say, at our local restaurants and our Toyota Town Center. So we would definitely like to see the dollars in the community going to those fun things versus basic utilities, but it is a reality. As Jessica mentioned, we fund our utility replacements through rates. So if we do anything to change those, it's not grant funded, we may have to raise rates on a water to build such a big project. So we've had a lot of conversations that are leading us down this path to you today. So the property of interest, as you know, what we've showed before on a map that we provided, is the area that the school district owns. We have this on a large scale map too, because we can play with it in a little bit. But right now you'll recognize these properties between Crawford and Okanagan as the school district properties. They're all outlined in yellow. We can come back to this slide, but I'm going to go on to the next one. I want to talk about why this property, because I'm sure this is what you're asking. Why are they looking at our property? Why don't they go look at other pieces of property? Well, the most obvious is we're already there. We already have a tank. It's a lot easier to build another tank right next door. There's pipes, there's plumbing, there's already a water supply. And so that does make it the most obvious answer. But there's quite a bit more to this because we're already there. So I'm going to flip the slide in just a minute, but in the room with me are 2 poster boards, and I want to explain what you're looking at, and you'll have the ability to look at them on Zoom too. So this poster, this is our city limits, and it's outlined in green, and this big orange streak is the elevation level. And it's really important when you get into water hydraulics. Anytime we move outside of the elevation level in our industry terms, we call that the hydraulic grade. When you move outside the hydraulic grade, you just doubled your cost because you have to add pumps, more pipes, the bells and whistles to get it up to that same height. Waterworks on pressure, which requires elevation and gravity. Without it, you're pumping and pushing, and that gets very expensive. From an engineering perspective, we can build a water reservoir anywhere. We can do it. We're smart enough, but the cost goes up, double, triple, and so on. So that goes back to the affordable housing component. So by building on the same hydraulic grade, which is everything in orange, we're going to make it a lot easier to move water in the city. And the rest of our tanks are built relying on this tank being on this hydraulic grade so we can push it up to another reservoir and trickle down to the houses below. Kind of try to give you a visual how you move that water around the city and into hydrants. The other thing is what land is available? Well, there isn't a lot of land available left in the city of Wenatchee. If you start to look at properties that have nothing built on them, there's just not a lot. And then when you look at the orange area and you ask yourself, how many are available in that elevation, it gets even smaller. And so this tank was put in place, and luckily you guys had preserved this land around it, that is still one of the available pieces of land. So if we look at not building on the school district property, then we are looking at demolishing houses, buying out vacant parking lots, churches, roadways. The cost goes on. We can move around the map and move the housing around to see how many houses we would have to essentially demolish or buy out neighborhoods to go in and put a reservoir in that place. Because they do have a pretty big footprint is one of the challenges with building a water reservoir, especially when we look at building a bigger water reservoir. We'd like to go from a 4 to an 8 million gallon reservoir. So we're doubling in size without going up or not as much up because that helps us fit into the community. So this is a map of our pressure zone. It's pretty intense, but the water reservoir is in the green right here is the existing reservoir. And that whole green section is the same hydraulic grade as what you're seeing on the poster boards that we've brought with you. So that's our goal, is to stay within that area. So for those online, this is the one that shows the orange zone with the elevation requirements that we need, and it provides the right pressure. Other things we looked at, land challenges, as I mentioned, there's not too much land. The height of the tank goes back to fitting into the community. In this particular area, a lot of people don't want us to build up. So if we can build in a hole or be at a lower elevation than, say, your bedroom window, and you're looking over our tank instead of through our tank or at our tank, that's really appealing to be a neighbor in a community. We don't have to hide it with as much screening, and it can fit in and feel more natural. So we can build up. That is one engineering theory. You can build steel tanks and they get really tall, but they tend to get a lot of public pushback because nobody wants that in their backyard. Availability of property, the proximity to other utilities as far as where all our piping is, and then just the simple cost of relocating to somewhere else can get very, very expensive. So when we look at your property, we see a lot of shared opportunities through the meetings that we've had over the last couple of years with Dr. Gordon and Dr. Callahar and hearing from some of your school board. We have heard multiple times that you are in need of school sports fields. We know that you have a high value for affordable housing and attracting families and teachers and different locations for your staff. And some other things I wanted to bring up that I don't know if you've thought about or heard about much is the ability to provide a park on any of the vacant land, added value to your property by having us develop some of the utilities in place. And our community, not our community, I'm sorry, our comprehensive plan for traffic and roads shows that Gear Road should be built through the site. And you can see that online on our comprehensive plan, but on our map here that we brought with us today, we show the Gear Road in blue cutting through. And this is a road that needs to be built one way or another. Whoever goes first will probably be building that road, at least half of the street, if not the full street, but the right of way would need to be present as this property develops. So that could be a shared opportunity for whoever's going forth. And then if we did do something like this project in this area, we would really like to be very hard hitters on community development, getting the neighborhood's feedback, getting the school district's feedback, all around what this would look and feel like as it settles into the neighborhood and becomes a new part of the neighborhood. We can involve students and staff, and we can allow people to be part of our project. We'd be really excited to do that. And that's why I mentioned there the STEM and student participation, which we've talked a little bit about at previous meetings, but that would just be icing on the cake for us to have helpers in our project. So with that, I wanted to share this one last slide before we really just turn it over and start talking with you more. But I asked our engineers to work up some numbers so we'd have something to talk about today. So based on those shared opportunities that we mentioned, I said, can you tell us on high dollar estimates what some of these things would cost? So this is what they told us. The Gear Road extension will cost $1.2 million to build. The football and soccer field will cost $750,000. These are based on some jobs they've already done. So these are today's dollars. The stormwater utility that needs to be built to take the stormwater off the site, whether it would be for our water reservoir, we are still required to meet our codes. We have to take stormwater off just like a developer or just like you would, is anywhere between $500,000 and $1 million, depending on how we build that stormwater. Most likely through piping, because the infiltration rates did not come back very well on this land. So it'd probably be closer to the $1 million. We could do some grassy swales and some other things. I could tell you more about stormwater if you really want to talk about it, but that's why the price tag varies. Depends on above ground or below ground. The parking lot with 90 stalls and a full build out. We have heard that you have an interest in a football field with soccer fields, and that would require parking. One of our ideas would be to demolish the existing tank where it's at. And when we're done, we would build a parking lot there to serve the football field. So we asked them to price out the cost of a 90 stall parking lot under city code conditions with landscaping requirements met and asphalt and paving. That parking lot would cost $1.2 million to build. And then we were curious about whether or not we could put a residential development on the property that we do not need for a water reservoir, which I'll go back to the map in just a second. We'll stay there on that map. But they estimate that the land value alone is worth $650,000, and a development would be anywhere between $10 and $16.5 million. And so a pretty hefty price tag to develop residential there. And where we're talking about, let me see if I can get back to the map. I can show you on here specifically, and then I'll flip through the slides. But ideally, if you were just like, yep, let's go for it, we would build our water reservoir down here in this lower south corner. And the reason we choose that property is for several reasons. It's actually the hardest piece of property to develop. From a utility perspective, if you were a developer, you're going to have to deal with this canal, and you're not going to be able to get to any of the utilities in Okanagan. And so it would be very costly. It's also sloping to the east. So your stormwater and sewer are going to have to run to the east without pumping it, which is not desirable. So we like this corner because it would actually hide part of our tank. We do like to be a little bit more secure, and we feel like we would fit into the community better down there by being low enough and then being able to do some landscaping that we would make a better neighbor than being anywhere up here where we were in somebody's face and just staring at a big concrete tank. We still favor a concrete tank and over a steel tank like you'd see on the west side. It's better suited for our valley and our purpose. So there also can be half buried, which helps us get lower yet. So by being in a hole, we're already partially buried. We would actually dig it deeper and go farther down in this hole. Which leaves then these upper lots to be more developer friendly for housing, residential, a future school if you end up doing that, or even ball fields. So ideally, I'll show you what we've kind of ideally, and then we would put a water reservoir there. And we would put, this is your potential housing in here. This is just like one layout. It's too tall for me, Jessica. And then put a parking lot here. These can all be moved around. And then this could even be a part. We do recognize that there are residents living here, and they would be living out their life there. We've met with them. They're lovely people, and we have no intention of changing that arrangement. I would like to say that up front because they were very concerned when we did our survey work. And so, but ultimately that could later turn into some sort of park or something that complements the neighborhood or whatnot. Jessica, you can help me out? Thank you. There you
Darcy, did I
go.
understand that?
Thank
that
you.
Where that parking lot was is where the current reservoir or the current
Yes.
container is.
And it needs to stay until we build the new one. Because as Jessica alluded to, we have fire flow and everything. We can't take it offline. But it's, once the new reservoir is built, we would just demo it. If there's no use to us, it's lived beyond its life. And so we would just tear it down. And at that point, we would suggest that could be the parking lot for the soccer or football field up here. And the soccer and football field ideally has potential to be part of the stormwater solution. But the infiltration rates aren't coming back desirable. We were hoping to have like stormwater under it, and we need to pipe, and we still may be able to do some. We'll probably have to do some further testing because the initial results were not draining as fast as we would like. So we'd pipe the stormwater. So just understanding where these would lay out is why I wanted to put this up here for you. So you could kind of get an idea that this would all be left back open for schools or your future soccer fields and what you need. Also, this is more desirable for any housing and development because the utilities are all out in Okanagan. Or even up here because you'd have a new road. But this road would need to be built. If we went first, we would be developing this road. If we didn't do this and you came in with your schools or your sports field, you would need to develop part of this road as well as the stormwater and the sewer to take this off of there. Those are standard kind of development requirements.
Corey, do I remember correctly that that was middle school? That was the size of the space? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and this has a lot of flexibility. We were just trying to take into account what we've heard over the last few years. I'll leave you with this before we just talk about it as an open discussion. If we just kept going today as a city, and I'm project manager and I just kept going with this project, by the time we replace this project, it will have its 100th birthday party. Hopefully with a ribbon cutting on a new reservoir, and we get to take the sledgehammer to the old. But even if I'm allowed to go as fast as I can, the reality is this tank will be 100 years old. It takes that long to get funding, to get drawings, to get through our own permits. It's going to take us till it's 100. And so that includes us applying for funding, probably multiple funding packages. There's only one funding package I know of right now that foots this bill. We probably more likely would layer it and do several different funding packages, one for safe streets and clean parks and one for toxic cleanup, things like that. There's all these different, we can go after multiple grants to layer it, which will take time and effort. Once we have that money approved, then we can set the engineers free. Building the tank is the easiest part. It's concrete, they stand it up. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then we can make it live and turn it on. So that's a very optimistic timeline right now that we're trying to follow is 5 years because we have our hands full. I just wanted to share that with you. That's for us to worry about, but just so you have that knowledge. So with that, we really just would like to talk to you more. This is how we envision we would get there, is we work together. We figure out what our shared values and goals are. And the community is very important to us. We're not there yet, but I want you to know that once we are there, the community is going to be our next biggest push, is to really start a community outreach program. That includes going door to door to all these neighborhoods and actually talking to these people. We host a lot of public meetings. We bring them in, we let them see the drawings. We talk to them about what it looks like. We want them to be involved. This is their public drinking water. The more they care, the more they're interested, the better it is for all of us, because they will become protectors of this drinking water for years to come. And they might be future city planners and engineers, and we need them to know what they're up against the next time it's their turn, because we're not sticking around forever. And then, of course, the design and the funding. And honestly, that's probably the easier part of the project. That once we really figure out our stakeholders and the right place to build this. So that's what brings us here today. We really think this is a win-win opportunity. I know it feels like we've already staked out your land, but it's just, that's how we work when we look at it all. But we really think there's an opportunity here where our project can help your project, knowing that you need future sports fields and you're going to need utilities if you build this school district. And if we go first, we're probably going to get a lot of heavy lift stuff done for you. And maybe that'll make your price tag easier, because building a school can't be cheap either. And you're gonna have all these same challenges with a different building, and then who knows what the regulations are gonna be when you get to your school. So they always seem to be changing. So this is something we talk about a lot. There's no alternative for water. There just really isn't. We can replace power with many different things. We can burn coal, we can burn different fuels, we can create hydroelectricity. We cannot create more water. And this is what keeps me up at night. This is what brings me to work every day. How do we protect our public water for the next 50 years for all of our future generations? The water you drink today is 100 years old. That's how long it takes to go through the cycle. If we use it faster than it goes through the cycle, we're most likely not going to have water for a period of our life. So we really got to be mindful of how we use our water, how we plan for it. And so that's what we're here for. And with that, I typed up a few questions that I thought would be a good place to start, but we really just want to have an open conversation with you about, what do you think? Are we crazy? Can we, or we have other opportunities or things we're not thinking of? Because we definitely would like to hear everything you can throw at us. And it doesn't have to be today. This is a lot of information. So we wanted to provide the slides and maybe another opportunity to talk, because we just want you to think about it and how it would affect you and what we could do. So
I had one question up top. Would we be able to do like housing development while I know you have the 5-year time frame for building the reservoir. Would you be able to do construction of, if we did do homes next to that space, would that be able to go concurrently, or would you have to, the reservoir has to be in and then you can start doing the other more, I'm looking more at the housing projects.
I don't see why not, except I'm thinking about the Gear Road, the road to how you access the site, but most of your site can be accessed right off of Okanagan. Even this piece down here where we've taped up the community development, those can all be accessed. We'd probably be most mindful of the neighborhood and the noise and how much dust and debris. I mean, coming from a developer world, we get calls all season long about the dust.
Right.
The dust, the dust, the dust, the noise, the backup alarms. It would,
Yeah.
but then again, we get it all done, right?
Do
We
it
get
5
in,
years,
we
you're
get
done.
out.
So
Yeah,
you want to go for 10?
You know, I don't mind that either. Sometimes I think we should just go in and burden somebody once and not come back over and over again, because they'll plan accordingly. And that's really where public outreach is your best friend. You got to just be out there every day. On my projects, I'm out there every day. I show up at people's houses as soon as they call. I just say, give me your address. I'm driving out there. They just want to hear from you. I can't always make it better. I definitely can't stop the wind. Dust. Dust complaints are the hardest thing in the valley to deal with, because it's dusty. You dig a hole, it's dusty. We have crud for soil, Yeah. So, but I don't see that our project would delay anything else from happening around. So
Is the city's proposal to acquire that entire piece from gear down or to the tank, or just the piece with for the tank, and then leaving everything around as? I assume
I'll
the
pull
housing
these
would be
off.
separately owned, but the park
I
and the
think what we'd
steel.
like to purchase is these three here. But the way I understand it right now, the way the yellow lines are drawn, even though this looks like a separate piece of property, it
Okay.
is not.
Because of the canal.
So one of our opportunities would be to purchase the three and then sell this back to a developer, or Stephen has some ideas on how we could help facilitate that being an affordable housing with some of the rules. Do you want to speak to that a little bit? I'm not as comfortable with what we can do, but we have powers to help make this affordable housing driven.
So that I guess is helpful but concerning as well, because part of me, since we've got budget challenges on our side, we were looking at this land as, not only for affordable housing, but also a sort of fair market value on it, because we do need to replenish our capital funds and whatnot. And so the idea of the city being able to go out and bid a housing project kind of has me feeling mixed, because part of me would think, well, shouldn't we hold on to that land and go bid it? Because are you going to make more putting out that project than we would? So that's where my mind goes. If we're going to sell it to you, you're going to then go out and sell it to somebody else. Why don't we just sell it to somebody else? Like do a boundary line.
Wouldn't do us any good with the canal in between. So that's one of the reasons those would rise to the top as far as, we toyed with the idea of we need an outbuilding, but, the outbuilding would fit here. Oh, thank you. Kind of speak loud, but for those on board, I mean, there's still a lot of opportunity to move things around, but these rows to the top as well, the canal is already there, so it's challenging. It really doesn't connect to this side of the property where there's more opportunity to build a tank and a football field. And the football field ultimately we're looking at, so we could put stormwater under it and it would be retention, and then it can drain out to a system that then takes the water off site. So we're basically building a sports facility on top of a stormwater facility. It's layered utilities. It uses land more effectively, so.
Is there still a plan to build? Because I understand this has kind of changed a little bit because now the size is bigger. Is that this one now is proposed to be one of the 8 million
It is
tanks
proposed to be an 8
In-
million gallon tank.
instead of 4. And so I think originally we were looking at plans that had one of them being like you were building a bridge across the canal or rerouting the canal.
Oh, those were the really early plans that
Yeah.
RH2 did for us. Yeah, and that's okay, because that's how we evolve too, right? As we figure out what our needs are. And as Jessica spoke to a little bit, we have an 8 million gallon reservoir. And the 8 million gallon reservoir has to come offline as well. Not only will it need replaced in another 20 years, but also to take an 8 million gallon reservoir offline is no small feat. That's a lot of water. And if we don't have a same size tank, we cannot easily take an 8 million gallon reservoir down. And so we've upsized this tank for a few reasons. One, our future demand actually says we will need an 8 million gallon reservoir in our city at one point. But also we would like to be able to replace the 8 million gallon reservoir in the next 20 years. And we need the ability to serve the whole city off of one system while we do that. And so the tank that will be 8 million actually gets split in half. It's a newer technology, though they're being built quite a bit these days. But what it allows is you to control one side, and not you can have both running or one side running and the other side down. Has a lot of control. There's a lot of features that we really like when we looked at that model of tanks. I'm happy to tell you more about that, but I don't want to spend too much time on the engineering of the tank unless you want to know that. So, but so yes, we are looking at a much bigger tank than our original conversations when we started out with Dr. Gordon, and we were just talking about replacing the existing tank. Does that help answer your question? Is there other concerns or things that interest you or ideas you've thought about with this land?
I just had a question just based on your other conversation about the other 8 million gallon tank. So for that one is you'll dismantle that, demolish it, rebuild before it goes back online. Is that how that one will work most likely?
That one has challenges. Do you want to speak to
I was
that,
just-
Jessica?
'cause this one is going to be able to have the 4 million gallon one running while the other one's being built, which seems optimal. Like that's awesome. This other one, and if there are more pertinent questions, we can.
No.
Just curious.
No, that's a great question. And, this is the best case scenario, right? To build the new tank and not have to take the other tank out of service. And actually at this point, I don't know that we have any other option, but to build a new tank. We can't take the 4 million gallon out of service. for that period of time, and it would really compromise the safety of our community and the amount of water we could supply. So, and you see what's happening with housing, right? Housing's not slowing down, growth isn't slowing down. So, and unlikely with the other 8 million gallon tank replacing that one, we also call it our Jefferson Reservoir, is we, as time passes, we may be in the same scenario where it has to stay in service and we need to find another location to build another tank. So it just depends on how quickly we're able to get this work done to secure funding. So yeah, this is the first step. It's the oldest tank, and we'll get that one replaced first as quickly as we can.
Excellent. Thank you. That makes sense. Looks like we have about 10 minutes left. I want to make sure I'm prioritizing any questions from the board. Obviously, without Martin and Maria here, we may have had more questions. And so there may be some questions that follow after, as when Maria feels better and Martin gets back from vacation, they have a chance to watch this. And our collaboration never stops. So we can ask those questions and meet whenever we want. But are there any other questions?
It's still a lot to digest.
It is.
As you
Well,
said, there was a lot
And that's
going
so
on
true.
there.
So, and that might necessitate some board district collaboration too, and us build a Q&A that I can share with you, and then we can get those answers back as well. But I just want to make sure I'm prioritizing your questions, because I'm just curious, how can we fight fires with clean drinking water as opposed to like
Brown water.
river water? Yeah. What do you, what is that? Just out of curiosity, I just not predicated on Okanagan street property. I'm just curious, but we don't have access to that, but yeah, but like, yeah, but I know we do fight some fires with river waters because we've all watched the airplanes do the dunk and things, but just out of curiosity, and it might just be ease of access, right? That's the water that's available when a house is on fire in the middle of town. Get it?
I think that's exactly right. So the key is do you want to run down to the river and dip the bucket, or have the plane fly out and dip it and then fly over? Or do you want the water immediately accessible? And that's the benefit of accessing the water system, is it's right there in front of your house or no more than 300 feet away. So that's really the key. So, yep. And the other piece of it is too, is a lot of the building codes require, especially for multi-story buildings, that you have fire protection in the building, the fire sprinkler systems. And so again, this is the biggest driver for why we have to build big tanks and big pipelines, is for fire protection. If we were only providing you water to drink and take showers, the pipelines would be very small. We wouldn't need as big a reservoirs, but really the fire protection is the driver of that. And how quickly can we respond to the fire at your location?
Makes sense. Thank you.
Feed each other's system, but at the end of the day, we still have one water source that we're all sharing. And so we only have so much water unless we can store it, and we could store more until we run out of that. But we can, even though the PUD is within our system, we call them donut holes, because within the city limits, they'll have a couple blocks that they are served, but it's piping, and we can turn valves and switches and send water into their tanks and vice versa. Actually, a lot of the tanks you probably see from driving around are the PUDs. Ours are pretty hard to see, except this one. And even people don't usually know that this is a water tank, but they always say to me, oh, but are you the one on Sage Hills? Nope, that's the PUD. Are you the one on the Skyline? Nope, that's the PUD. The ones we can just kind of see as residents are the PUDs, like tanks. So they give us, I think they have 22 tanks, or they have a lot, they have smaller tanks, but they have more of them because they have more county, where, as Stephen showed on our map and this map shows, we have a pretty small city limit boundary that we're taking care of. No, and then you get to East Wenatchee and they're doing the same thing, and now they're pumping water out with Baker Heights and stuff, so.
Oh, yeah.
What was on?
Yeah, can we repeat all that?
Good if you want to, but.
So looks like
Yeah, good.
we're good for now. Okay, so we need some processing time. That sounds wonderful. I just want to thank you for coming, all three of you. Thanks for sharing. highly interesting and engaging information and topics. I appreciate the preface of what's happening locally just with housing in general. So thank you for that, Stephen. And thanks to the two of you for not only the collaboration we've had over the last couple of years and longer, but just for being willing to come and meet with the board and have this presentation. So with that, I'll thank you and we'll get back to you with the questions that I received from the board and we'll go from there.
Thank you guys for your time.
There is. All right. Yeah. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah.
Sorry, I have one more question. And I know it's outside of your desired boundary, but what about Lincoln Park?
Lincoln Park is a landfill, and so we wouldn't be able to dig that up to put the tank in there. It's a closed
I didn't even
landfill.
know. I didn't even know that.
Great question, though.
All right. Are we good now? Okay. All right. Thanks. All right. Well, meeting adjourned.